Yo, what's going on, YouTube? And welcome back to Goal Line Hockey. It's your boy, Kevin Forte. Guys, we're taking a look today as we continue the Season Outlook series where we look through all 32 NHL teams, if I think they make the playoffs next year or not, looking at who they added and subtracted this season. And as today, we quite fittingly, with this beautiful jersey on, we're looking at the Coyotes. And the Arizona Coyotes are a very interesting team here. I think they are one of the most really at the top of the league in terms of players moved, whether in or out. They have made a lot of changes to their team, and this is a very different team than the team we saw at the end of the season here in 2021. So let's take a look at what they added. Now, they added a lot. We're going to start off with forwards. It took me 2 different pages to actually fit this all in. So we're going to look at forwards. Via the big Oliver Ekman-Larsson trade, they brought in Louis Eriksson, Jay Beagle, and Antoine Roussel. Those were a couple of big guys that they brought in via that trade. They made trades with some other teams. They bring in Andrew Ladd from the New York Islanders for a couple of draft picks. They bring in Shane Gostisbehere from the Philadelphia Flyers from a couple of draft picks. And they also brought in Anton Strawman, who is an unrestricted free agent. That they actually, never mind, they acquired him via trade. So make sure to mention that as well. So those are just some of the guys that were kind of cap dumps, but they come into the roster, and will they or will they not play? We don't necessarily know. I don't know how healthy Ladd is. He played 1 game in Bridgeport last year. Eriksson has been hurt. Beagle, Roussel, they've all been hurt. I don't necessarily know how long they'll play. Anton Strawman, I think he will play with the Coyotes next year. But those are just a couple of names to look at. They also brought in some actually pretty talented players. They bring in Ryan Dzingel, who came in via free agency. They gave him a couple $2 million to come into Arizona. Not hard to sell with a couple $1 million plus the really nice weather down there. They bring in Dmitry Yaskin, who is probably the biggest addition they made this offseason. This is a guy that just honestly kind of fell into their lap. So he's one of those guys. He's a former St. Louis Blues draft pick. Things didn't work so well in the NHL. He ends up going overseas to the KHL, puts up some really, really good stats. Pretty impressive numbers in the KHL. So he comes back to the U.S. and he'll be playing with the Yotes in the fall. Adds a little bit of offensive punch to this team that is desperately going to need it after some of the moves they made. They bring in Liam O'Brien and Travis Boyd, former Hershey Bears, so I thought I'd mention that. So I guess they've been watching some Hershey Bears games over the last couple of years. Some really nice veteran additions to the roster. They've played a lot of games in the NHL. Some really nice moves there by the Coyotes in that regard. They also bring in right shot defenseman Connor Timmins in a big trade that they made with Darcy Kemper going to the Colorado Avalanche. Connor Timmins and a draft pick came the other way. So Connor Timmins, I would expect him with more ice time in Arizona to be a pretty prolific top 4 defenseman in the NHL. Probably something he wasn't going to get that opportunity in Colorado. And then you look at the goaltenders. They brought in 2 new goaltenders. They moved on from 3 of their former goaltenders. They bring in Josef Kojenar in a trade where they traded Adin Hill, which I'll get to that later. So they bring in Kojenar. And they also bring in Carter Hutton via free agency, who has played with the Buffalo Sabres the past couple years. And if you know anything about the Sabres, things haven't gone well, and things didn't go so well for Carter in Buffalo. And now looking at some of the guys that they lost. So they start off with Tyler Pitlick going in the expansion draft. He is now moved on from Seattle. He is now up in Calgary, a division rival. Go figure there. So Tyler Pitlick is gone. Connor Garland, again, part of that big Oliver Ekman-Larsson trade. He is up in Vancouver. Oliver Ekman-Larsson, again, in Vancouver. And then you look at some of these interesting moves they made. Darcy Kemper is now a member of the Colorado Avalanche. They have traded Kemper out. Adin Hill also traded out. He is now in San Jose with the San Jose Sharks. And Antti Ranta left the team via free agency, where he is now a member of the Carolina Hurricanes. So a couple of interesting departures here for the Coyotes. Really the bigger ones being Connor Garland, Ekman-Larsson, and Darcy Kemper, who has 1 year left on his deal. The most shocking, though, out of all of them is Adin Hill. I really thought they were going to keep Adin Hill, especially once they traded Darcy Kemper. the thing is, they traded Hill first. So now it was like, okay, so they're going to trade Hill, they're going to lose Ronta, and they're going to trade Kemper. They did all three. Very, very interesting. Um, but like I said, now they brought in Kojanar and Hutton. I don't know if that necessarily makes them better. I really would have preferred that they kept Aiden Hill, but I guess they decided to go in a different direction. So a very, very, very different team in Arizona. It took me 5 minutes to go over all the additions and subtractions. Yeah, this Coyotes team looks very different going into next year. And you look at some of their point producers from last year. Phil Kessel led the team in points, 43 points. Jacob Chikrin, 41 points as a defenseman, second on that list. And then Connor Garland and Oliver Ekman-Larsson are in that list as well. But you got guys like Keller, Schmaltz, Dvorak, Goligoski, Brassard, Michael Bunting, who has now moved on from the Toronto Maple Leafs. I forgot to mention him. So there's a couple of guys here. Goligoski has since moved on. Again, there were so many things that happened. I tried to keep track of some of them. But Goligoski is now a member of, I'm going to say, the Minnesota Wild. I'm not 100% certain on that. I'm pretty sure, though. So they've lost a lot of bodies. And this is one of those teams that they just, you look at some of those guys, right? Garland, out. Ekman-Larsson, out. Goligoski, out. Derek Brassard, I don't think he re-signed. Michael Bunting, out. So this team just, in terms of their point producers, they're going to have to get points from different players. And that's why they were brought in guys like Ryan Dzingel and Dmitry Yaskin, because they're expecting them to maybe produce a little bit to replace some of those guys. But that is no replacement to Garland and the production that they had from those guys. They are definitely going to need a lot more. I think their goaltending got a lot worse. Not a discredit to guys like Hutton and Kojanar, but let's be honest, they are not the same caliber of Aiden Hill, Kemper, and Ronta. They're just not. Kemper's a really good goaltender, really underrated. I think he'll do really well in Colorado. And Aiden Hill, he may be the next guy in San Jose. I think that was a really good pickup. So you look at the cap space they have $9 million in cap space, but they brought in a ton of draft picks. This summer was about second round picks for the Arizona Coyotes. They now have, in the next 3 drafts, in the second round, they have 8 second-round draft picks. They have a Colorado first-rounder this year as well in that Kemper deal. And not to mention, they have 2/3 in 2023 and 2/3 in 2024. Not to mention 2/4 in 2024 as well. So they just have a absolute ton of draft picks. A lot of this may be an overcorrection for the lack of draft picks they had in this year's draft. They lost their draft pick in the first round because of illegal scouting practices under the old management and the old regime there in Arizona. So they had to recoup draft picks, and they were definitely able to do that by taking on cap space. But very interesting moves. I don't see them in the playoffs this year. They're going to be in a tougher division in the Central. They now move to the Central Division thanks to the Seattle Kraken coming in. Again, a lot of people are kind of biting their nails about potential relocation, but I think in today's NHL, I just don't see that happening with today's climate with post-pandemic. So the Arizona Coyotes have some time to figure things out. I think they just looked at the division and they said, we're not going to be able to compete in this division. I mean, you look at the Blackhawks, they got a lot better. The Dallas Stars, you could argue they probably should get better. The St. Louis Blues, I think they're on the downspin. But then you have teams like Nashville who are also on the downspin. Like Arizona, it could be one of those weird teams where they're just going to bottom out. But in this division, I'm kind of surprised that they are doing that. But whatever, I guess that's part of it. Maybe they just want to see how they fit in the Pacific Division. They just outside of the Pacific Division now that they're in the Central. So I think it's going to be interesting. We're going to see a rebrand of the Coyotes. That's why I'm wearing the Kachina jersey today. It seems like they will have a white Kachina jersey, which that video has been doing very good recently. So they're going back to the old roots with the Kachina. They're getting rid of the crying coyote logo, which everybody loves, or the yawning coyote. Everybody's got different names for it. But the Arizona Coyotes will not be in the playoffs next year. I just don't see it. They lost way too many just glue guys in this team. You still have Clayton Keller. You still have Nick Schmaltz. You have still Phil Kessel on one more year on his contract. but we're going to need to see more from some of the young guys, and they may not be done yet either. I mean, I'm talking about Christian Dvorak being on this roster. It seems very likely him, Christian Dvorak, and or Christian Fischer could be out of Arizona by the end of the summer. You have Barrett Hayden, Lawson Krause, Dmitry Yaskin, and then Ryan Dzingel, Beagle, Rossell. I mean, this team is just going to look totally different. You look at their defense, totally different. There's only 2 names that remain from last year's team. 3 names, 3 of the 6 guys that remain from last year. You have Jacob Chikrin, Ilya Lyubushkin, and Victor Soderstrom. Everybody else, you have Connor Timmins in there, Shane Gostisbehere, Anton Strawman. It's going to be a very different looking team, not to mention a completely new goalie tandem with Kozenar and Carter Hutton. I don't have them making the playoffs this year. Hate to say it, Coyotes fans, this could be a really rough year. I think they are completely tanking this team, and we'll see what happens next year. Again, there is reason to be excited for the Coyotes. They have a ton of draft picks, and it's one of those things where it's like a magic bean. You don't know what you're getting with a draft pick. It could end up being a AHL bust guy that just never develops. You could get that with a 5th overall pick. Ask the New York Islanders with how many of those they've had in recent years. So it's just one of those things where you just don't know what you get. And the problem is, you rely a lot on guys like Clayton Keller. He had a down year last year. Nick Schmaltz has been battling injuries ever since he's been in Arizona. And Barrett Hayden, a former top 5 draft picks, just hasn't developed into what I think the Coyotes were hoping for. So hopefully this is the year that we see the Coyotes maybe develop a little bit of their younger guys. But I do have them missing the playoffs this season in the Central Division. So let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. What do you think of the Arizona Coyotes? Do they get back into the playoffs this year? Do you think they tank to acquire a top draft pick, potentially by the name of Connor Bedard? Let me know your guys' thoughts in the comment section down below. And if you guys like what we're doing here at Goal Line Hockey, want to see more videos just like this with our season outlook series, make sure to give this video a big thumbs up and an even bigger subscribe down below. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you guys next time.